A single lamp burns in a rented room above a Munich beer hall. It's autumn, 1919. 14 years from tonight, the man sitting alone at this table will hold the power to rewrite the laws of an entire nation. Right now, he owns nothing but the chair he's sitting in. He is 30 years old, no wife, no trade, no home of his own. Twice, the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts rejected his paintings. He spent the First World War as a message runner, decorated for bravery, never promoted past corporal. The men who served beside him remember him as intense, withdrawn, prone to long silences broken by longer speeches nobody had asked for. Tonight, he is one of millions of unemployed veterans in a defeated country, a man with no office, no money, and no one listening to him. That is about to change. That September, the army sends him to observe a meeting, a fringe political group calling itself the German Workers' Party. Fewer than 60 members, no funding, no influence. He is told to sit at the back and watch. Instead, he stands up, and he speaks. His name is Adolf Hitler. This is the story of the 14 years that follow. When the First World War ended in 1918, Germany's territory had not been occupied. The armistice was signed while German forces still held ground outside the country's own borders. For many ordinary Germans, news of defeat arrived less like the end of a lost battle and more like a sudden reversal. Then came the Treaty of Versailles, the peace settlement that formally ended the war. Under Article 231, Germany was required to accept responsibility for the war, a clause that became known as the War Guilt Clause. Its army was limited to 100,000 men, its air force banned outright, its navy reduced to a coastal defense force. Territory was reassigned to neighboring states, and it was handed a reparations bill so large that some economists at the time argued it could not realistically be paid without crippling the German economy for a generation. Into this settlement came a new government, the Weimar Republic, Germany's first parliamentary democracy. It faced organized opposition from communist movements on one side and nationalist movements on the other, almost from its first day in power. A narrative spread quickly across the German right that the army had not actually been defeated on the battlefield, but had been undermined from within by politicians and civilians at home. German forces had, in fact, retreated in reasonably good order, with the front line still on foreign soil when the armistice was signed. The narrative spread regardless, and it shaped political rhetoric for the next decade. Then, in 1923, came hyperinflation. A loaf of bread that cost under 1 mark in 1919 cost more than 200 billion marks by the autumn of 1923. Currency lost value so fast that some people burned banknotes for fuel, since the paper was worth less than the wood it would have replaced. Savings built up over a lifetime lost most or all of their value within months. It was into this environment, a defeated country, a resented peace, a currency in ruins, that a discharged corporal began speaking in public for the first time. By the time Hitler joined it, that small workers' party had already begun to change shape around its newest member. It was renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the NSDAP. It adopted a new banner, a red field, a white circle, and a swastika at its center, an older symbol the party repurposed for its own imagery. Picture one of the party's early beer hall meetings. The room is thick with smoke and the smell of beer. Rows of men sit shoulder to shoulder on wooden benches, coats still on against the cold outside. At the front, Hitler speaks without notes, his voice rising and falling, building toward each name he blames for the room's own hardship. Foreign governments, communists, Jewish people, the politicians who signed the treaty. Heads nod, fists strike the tables. By the time he finishes, Men who arrived as strangers are on their feet together. Meetings that had drawn dozens of people began drawing hundreds, then thousands. By 1921, he had become the party's leader. The NSDAP also formed a paramilitary wing, the Sturmabteilung, the SA, which provided security at rallies and fought running street battles with political opponents. On the night of the 8th of November, 1923, Hitler and armed members of the SA burst into a packed beer hall where a Bavarian government meeting was underway. Hitler fired a pistol shot into the ceiling and announced that the national revolution had begun. By the next afternoon, it was over. Police lines opened fire on the marchers in the street outside. 16 NSDAP members were killed within minutes. Hitler was arrested and tried for treason. The courtroom became the stage for his defense, filled with reporters, his statements printed in full, even by newspapers that opposed him. He was sentenced to 5 years, but served under 9 months before his release. In his cell, he dictated the text that became Mein Kampf, part memoir, part statement of political belief, published in 2 volumes in 1925 and 1926, laying out views he would later act on in office. After his release, NSDAP support declined for several years as the German economy stabilized. By the late 1920s, the party held a small minority of Reichstag seats. In October of 1929, the American stock market crashed. The effects reached Germany within weeks. American loans that had underwritten Germany's economic recovery since the mid-1920s, under an arrangement known as the Dawes Plan, were recalled. German businesses failed by the thousands. Unemployment climbed past 6 million by the early 1930s, touching nearly every family in the country in some form. The conditions that had shaped politics a decade earlier, resentment over the peace terms, a currency collapse still within living memory, returned in a new form. In the elections that followed, NSDAP support did not simply recover, it multiplied. By July of 1932, the party held more Reichstag seats than any other single party in Germany, though even at its peak that year, it never won an outright majority in a free national election. What followed the election results was not a seizure of power by force. It was a series of political negotiations. Conservative figures around President Paul von Hindenburg believed Hitler's mass public support could be used to their own advantage, while keeping the real levers of government in their own hands. On the 30th of January, 1933, they appointed him Chancellor of Germany. On the night of the 27th of February, 1933, firefighters arrive at the Reichstag to find the building already engulfed. Flames climb through the great glass dome as the assembly hall burns from the inside out. Inside, police find a man half undressed and out of breath, a Dutch council communist named Marinus van der Lubbe, later arrested and convicted of setting the fire alone. By morning, the government has publicly blamed a broader communist conspiracy, and within hours, emergency powers are already being drafted. The Reichstag fire decree, issued the following day, suspended a series of civil liberties guaranteed under the Weimar Constitution, including freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, and protection from detention without trial. A previously scheduled Reichstag election went ahead on the 5th of March. Held under those emergency conditions, the NSDAP won just under 44% of the vote, its highest result in any free election, but still short of a majority on its own. Combined with its coalition partner, the German National People's Party, it held a majority of Reichstag seats. 3 weeks later, on the 23rd of March, the Reichstag voted on the Enabling Act, a law permitting Hitler's cabinet to pass legislation without parliamentary approval for an initial period of 4 years. Passing it required a 2/3 majority. Communist Party deputies had already been arrested or barred from the chamber under the fire decree. Of the parties still able to vote, only the Social Democrats voted against it. It passed. From that day forward, Hitler's government held the legal authority to make law without the consent of the Reichstag. 14 years separate the man sent to observe a beer hall meeting in 1919 from the head of a government empowered to legislate without parliamentary consent in 1933. No foreign army crossed into Germany in that time. No single violent coup succeeded in taking power. A lost war and a contested peace, a currency collapse, a failed uprising, and a book written in prison. A second economic collapse a decade later. An election, a fire, another election, a vote. The soldier from the rented room above the beer hall now commanded the most advanced industrial nation in Europe. What his government did with that power, and what it would cost the world to end it, is where this story continues.